All right. Welcome back, everyone, for our daily deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at some pretty interesting U.S. news and trends. We've got sources today from the world of business and restaurants and even immigration and trade.
Yeah, a real mixed bag.
Should be pretty
Should
intriguing.
give us a really good snapshot of, what's making headlines and what we should all be thinking about.
Fun
So,
stuff.
ready to jump in.
Let's do it. So one thing that really caught my attention, and I'm sure a lot of you out there as well, were those rumors flying around about Chipotle
Oh, yeah.
potentially going bankrupt next year
That was a wild one.
for a company that, seems to have such a devoted following.
Right.
It seemed pretty crazy.
It did. It is.
What's the real story there?
Well, the funny thing is, or I guess not so funny depending on how you look at it, the rumor really seems to have taken off because of a pretty simple mistake.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was this Spanish news report about a restaurant closing,
Okay.
and it was Farmesa. Farmesa.
Which, is a Chipotle spinoff.
Right.
But the article, it accidentally used Chipotle's logo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's all it took?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, that little visual error online, it just snowballed.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, people are thinking, oh, no, Chipotle's going down.
So just a simple image can really fuel misinformation like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
In this digital age, things can spread like wildfire.
So Chipotle, I mean, they must have been scrambling to put out that fire.
Oh, yeah. They definitely had to do some damage control.
What did they actually say to calm everyone down?
Their spokesperson, Erin Wolford, she came out and basically just said, look, we're doing fine.
Okay.
The company's not in any kind of trouble.
It's not even close to facing bankruptcy.
Not even close. In fact, she was actually talking about how they're in a big growth phase right now.
Really?
Yeah. They're planning to open like over 300 new locations this year.
Wow. That's a lot of burritos. That's a lot of burritos. And a lot of them, get this, they're going to have these digital drive-thrus.
Oh, interesting.
They're calling them Chipotlanes.
Chipotle, okay.
Yeah. It's pretty clear, I mean, they're investing in their future.
Yeah, adapting to how people want to get their food these days.
Exactly.
So it's not just talk, right? I mean, their finances actually back up this whole expansion plan.
Oh, yeah, they do. Just look at their numbers from last year.
Okay.
Revenue jumped by almost 15%.
Right.
And get this, they have zero debt.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they've got like $2 billion in cash on hand.
Oh, wow. That doesn't sound like a company that's about to go belly up.
Not at all. And their CEO, Scott Boatwright, he's been very vocal about their commitment to growth and just, making the customer experience better and better.
So they're not resting on their laurels.
Definitely not.
So strong revenue, no debt, and tons of expansion plan.
Right.
Sounds like the burrito business is alive and well.
Thriving, I'd say. And you know what else? They're still innovating.
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, they're testing out some new menu items, like honey chicken.
Honey chicken.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're trying new things.
Yeah, keeping things interesting.
Exactly. Which, to me, that just reinforces that they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's a good lesson there. Don't believe everything you see online.
Right. Do your research.
Always good to dig a little deeper. Okay, well, speaking of food, let's talk about what's happening right here in our own backyard, the Las Vegas restaurant scene.
Always changing, isn't it?
Always changing. And lately, we've seen a few longtime favorites shutting their doors.
Yeah, it's always a little bittersweet to see those places go.
It is. It makes you wonder, what does this mean for the Vegas dining landscape?
Well, I think it definitely reflects the fact that, Las Vegas is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And the restaurant industry has to keep up.
Right.
Sometimes that means saying goodbye to some old favorites to make way for the new.
Yeah. And, we're not just talking about the big flashy places on the Strip. There are some local spots that are closing, too.
That's right. Like Coyotes Cafe and Cantina in Henderson.
Yeah.
They were around for 30 years.
30 years. That's incredible for any restaurant.
It is. They were a real neighborhood institution, serving up classic Tex-Mex, enchiladas, fajitas, all that good stuff.
So why close after all that time?
It's hard to say for sure. They just put up a sign that said permanently closed.
Just like that.
Just like that.
It could be so many things, right?
It could be. Maybe the lease was up. Maybe the costs got too high.
Yeah.
Maybe the owners just decided to retire.
It's got to be tough to run a restaurant these days.
It is, especially with the rising costs of everything.
Makes you appreciate those places that manage to stay open even more.
Absolutely.
Okay, so from Henderson, let's head to the Strip where the buffet at Luxor is also closing down.
Another big one.
Yeah.
And this one, I think, really says something about how Vegas is changing.
Yeah, buffets used to be like synonymous with Vegas.
Right. All you can eat, whatever you want. It was like a rite of passage for visitors.
In the Luxor buffet, I mean, it had that whole Egyptian theme going
Yeah,
on.
it did.
It was an experience.
It was, but it's closing at the end of March.
End of March, okay.
And you know what? That leaves only 7 buffets operating in all the casinos on the Strip.
Wow. Only 7.
7. It's really the end of an era.
You know, it makes you wonder if maybe those mega buffets are just, not what people want anymore.
Could be. I mean, maybe people are more interested in, like, curated dining experiences now.
Right. Smaller portions, higher quality.
Exactly. Plus, those huge buffets, I mean, they must be a nightmare to run.
I can only imagine. The food costs alone must be astronomical.
Exactly. So maybe this is just a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Things change, tastes change.
It happens everywhere.
It does. And it's not just those big names,
Wow.
Even some smaller, popular spots are closing, too. Like, did you hear about Eat Downtown?
Oh yeah, the breakfast place.
Yeah. Chef Natalie Young's place.
That was a really popular spot.
It was. People loved it. But it closed after over a decade.
Wow. So even the smaller places aren't immune to these changes.
Nope. The competition in Vegas is fierce.
It is.
You got to constantly be innovating to stay ahead.
That's true. So what's Chef Young doing now?
Well, she's got a new venture. It's called Echo Taste and Sound.
Echo Taste and Sound. That's an interesting name.
Right. It's being described as, get this, a hi-fi listening restaurant.
A hi-fi listening restaurant. What does that even mean?
I'm not entirely sure, but it sounds like the music is just as important as the food.
Oh, interesting. So high-quality sound systems, curated playlists, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. It's all about creating a complete sensory experience.
So maybe that's the new trend.
Could be. People are looking for more than just a meal these days. They want an experience.
Yeah, something unique, something memorable.
Exactly. And Vegas is all about pushing the boundaries.
So even though we're seeing some closures, it sounds like the Vegas food scene is still as vibrant and innovative as ever.
Absolutely. It's a constant cycle of reinvention. Out with the old, in with the new.
All right, well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some national news that could have a pretty big impact on all of us. President Trump is proposing a 25% tariff on all imported cars.
Yeah, this is a big one.
It is. What's the rationale behind that? Why do that?
Well, the idea is to boost American manufacturing.
Okay.
Make those cars made in the USA more appealing.
So by making imported cars more expensive, it'll encourage automakers to, build factories here.
Exactly, or at least expand the ones they already have.
And that, in turn, would create more jobs in the U.S., right?
That's the hope.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the people who actually buy cars, the consumers? How would this affect them?
Well, the biggest concern is that car prices are going to go up.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, a 25% tariff, that's going to get passed on to the buyers one way or another.
Right. And even if you're buying an American-made car, wouldn't the prices still go up?
Probably, yeah. Less competition usually means higher prices.
So we're talking about potentially thousands of dollars more for a new car.
That's what experts are predicting.
Can you give us some specific examples?
Sure, like a popular import like the Toyota Tacoma. That could jump by several $1,000s.
Wow.
Even some cars that are assembled here, like the Chevrolet Equinox, they could see a price increase because they use imported parts.
Right.
So we could be talking about an extra $3,000 to $6,000 for a new Equinox.
That's a significant chunk of change.
It is, especially for families on a budget.
So what are other countries saying about this?
Well, the countries that export a lot of cars to the U.S., like Japan, Germany, Canada, they're not happy.
Yeah, I bet not.
They see it as a protectionist move, and they're worried it'll hurt their own industries.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And could it lead to some kind of retaliation? Like them putting tariffs on our products?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, so we could end up in a trade war.
It's a risk, and that could have even wider economic consequences.
Right. So it seems like this whole tariff thing, it's a really complicated issue with a lot of potential downsides.
It is, and the debate is really about whether the potential benefits, like creating jobs here, outweigh the risks, like higher prices and trade tensions.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Definitely. Especially since these tariffs are supposed to go into effect on April 2nd.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Okay. So from trade, let's move on to a story that hits a little closer to home, at least for those of us who value education and the rights of students. We've been hearing about a Tufts University student, Rumeysa Ozturk, who was recently detained by ICE.
Yeah, this is a really disturbing case.
It is. Can you tell us a little bit more about what happened?
So Rumeysa Ozturk is a Turkish national, and she's a PhD candidate at Tufts.
Okay.
She's studying child development.
All right. And she was detained by ICE.
Yeah, they apprehended her near her apartment in Somerville, Massachusetts.
What were the circumstances?
Well, she was actually on her way to break her fast for Ramadan.
Oh, wow.
Her lawyer says she has a valid F1 student visa.
So she was here legally.
That's right.
So why would ICE detain her if she had a valid visa?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, was there anything unusual about the way they detained her?
Well, apparently there's surveillance footage that shows plainclothes ICE agents detaining her.
Plainclothes.
Yeah. And it seems like they didn't really identify themselves clearly.
Oh, wow.
Which is raising concerns about whether her rights were violated.
Right. That's pretty concerning.
It is.
So what are people saying about why this happened?
Well, there's some speculation that it might be connected to her activism.
Her activism?
Yeah, she's been a pretty vocal advocate for Palestinian rights.
Okay.
And some people think that might be why she was targeted.
Wow.
Although ICE hasn't officially confirmed anything.
So potentially detaining someone for their political views.
That's the fear. And that raises some really serious questions about freedom of speech, especially on college campuses.
Absolutely. So what's been the response to all of this?
Well, thankfully, a federal judge has stepped in.
Okay.
He issued a restraining order to stop ICE from transferring her out of Massachusetts.
So she's still here for now.
She is. The judge is concerned about her due process rights.
That's good to hear.
And some politicians have spoken out, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like Representative Ayanna Pressley.
Okay.
She called the detention a violation of Ozturk's constitutional rights.
So there's been some pushback.
There has. And the community at Tufts is really rallying around her.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. They're demanding answers from ICE and calling for her release.
So it sounds like this story is still unfolding.
It is. And it's really shining a light on some important issues.
Yeah.
Like, how are we treating international students?
Right.
What are our priorities when it comes to immigration enforcement?
And what about basic civil liberties? So this is definitely a story we'll be keeping a close eye on.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive today.
Oh, wow. We covered a lot.
We did. We talked about Chipotle, the ups and downs of the Vegas restaurant scene,
Yeah.
those proposed car tariffs, and this really troubling case of the detained student.
It's amazing how all these seemingly different stories connect in some way.
They do. I mean, just think about it. The Chipotle thing, it reminds us to be careful about what we believe online.
Absolutely. Do your own research.
The Vegas restaurant scene, well, that shows how our tastes are always changing.
And how businesses have to adapt.
And then you have these car tariffs,
Yeah.
which could affect our wallets and maybe even our relationships with other countries.
And then, of course, the students' detention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really raises questions about individual rights and how we treat people who come here to study.
It's a powerful reminder that these big news stories, they affect real people's lives.
They do. So as you go about your day-to-day, I want you to think about this. We're seeing changes in Vegas with restaurants closing and maybe car prices going up. How do you think those changes, both local and national, will affect you and your community?
It's something to think about, isn't it?
It is, and maybe take a moment to think about those contrasting stories. We have Chipotle, this big company, doing really well.
Yeah.
And then we have this student facing a really uncertain future. What does that say about our society, about our values?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
It is. So I encourage you to keep exploring these stories, keep thinking about these issues, and keep engaging with the world around you.
That's what it's all about.
That's it for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more news and trends to keep you informed and thinking.
See you then.
See you then.